Welcome to you all. It's a real privilege to be here. We're excited to be involved. We're new providers of coaching education, so we wanted just to, when we were asked if we wanted to do a presentation, we thought, yes, we've got to do that. And our point of view is that we're looking to develop excellent multilingual coaches. We use a sort of humanistic method of teaching, which is based on originally on people like Carl Rogers and Maslow, but it's looking at the whole person from a point of view of positive self-regard, authenticity, and empathy, really. So the emotions are important to us, involvement, equality, participation, communication flow, and so on. So that's our sort of angle that we're coming from. And because we're based in Bratislava, and a lot of Claudia and Andrea are working for the Bridge School, which is a great school in Bratislava. We're working in sort of multi-language methods and teaching. So we thought that our coaching practitioner would take that into account, that people often learn a qualification in a second language, but is there specific help and adjustment for that? So we think we've designed a way of doing that. Okay, I'm going to just share the screen for the moment. And you'll see that that's our title. We've got the magnificent, you'll see these cards later on. It's one of our coaching tools that was invented by Andrea here, and they're called Dixit cards. And they're very useful ways of engaging and visualizing and articulating through an image. Okay, so you'll get a chance to use those in a minute. And overall, our purpose was to ask these questions. Does coaching in a second language improve both language and coaching? So there's a kind of indirect benefit. If you learn something in a language, you probably will learn that skill and that language better. So that was our approach. Are you different in a second language? Could you be more authentic? That's a question that we, between us, have debated. We're not sure we have the answers on that, but we want to share some thoughts. And what are the benefits and challenges of second language coaching? And what language challenges will people encounter? And then we're going to look at some linguistic, since this is seminar about language, or it's got a language element to it, we're going to look at some coaching tools based on language. And you're also going to get a chance to practice. Before we go any further, we thought you could perhaps, Andrea's going to put you into groups of, should we go 2s or 3s, Andrea? What do you think?
I'm going to divide you into 4 groups.
Okay, 4 groups.
4 groups, and it's going to be done randomly. So the system will decide who is going to work with who, okay?
Yeah, so the man or woman in the Zoom machine will determine everything. Yeah, if you can say hello in your own language, maybe coach if you are a second language speaker. If not, just say hello in whatever language you like. And maybe a little bit about yourself and why you're here and what you want to gain, your sort of learning intention, if you like, what you want to get out of the workshop. So it's going to be short and sweet. We'll give you about 4 minutes. Is that okay? How was that? Did you meet some nice people?
Yeah, I did.
Did you learn how to say hello in another language?
Yes.
Yeah? Which language?
Yeah, I learned in Swedish. It's the same like in Polish. It's hey.
Hey. Oh, that's nice. Hey in English now has become very trendy. Yeah. Hey. All the younger generation always say hey and not hi now. So hey. What's it in Slovak, Andrea?
Well, we say ahoy. Or
Ahoy.
ciao. Or ciao.
Yeah.
Ahoy.
Okay. And what
And
do
I
people?
learned
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
in Dutch, it's the hoi. So it's that I learned. It's very similar to Slovak.
Ah, cool. And what are people looking for from today? Is anyone willing to just share one of their goals?
We all came up with the same thing, so that knocks 3 of us off the list already.
Oh, cool. That's what I like. Efficiency.
Which was when we speak in our second language, not our maternal tongue, are we being authentic enough, accurate enough, such that we are really adding value in an appropriate way to the client? We all believed we listened better.
Yeah.
By not
Excellent.
in our maternal tongue.
Cool. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, we're going to explore that. Let me introduce you to 2 very important people here. Claudia Bednarova is she's the principal of the school. She's got a passion for education, a passion for language, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her experience. And Andrea is director of studies at the school, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how we work with people on a language coaching level. And then we're going to explore some of these issues and then do some interactive stuff as well. So that's really the sort of plan. So Claudia, do you want to go with yours?
Yes, sure. So thank you for coming. I hope that my experience is going to help you because I was an English teacher for a very long time. And then when I started my own school, I had a challenge to manage other people in a second language, which it was a challenge. I think it would have been challenge even in my mother tongue, but being I don't want to say forced, but in a way, yes, forced to speak English to people I managed made it even more difficult. And it took me some time to realize, but to cut the long story short, there was a time when whenever I wanted to persuade my team about something, I came across as too strict, arrogant even, or pig-headed, and the communication flow was very difficult. It was also very difficult to persuade people I work with about my great ideas that I had. And it took me some time to realize that it's actually the language I'm using or the way I speak in English, comparing to Slovak, to my mother tongue, that makes the things more difficult for me. And at that time, I started to look for a solution, and I came across coaching, which I wasn't a big fan of, and I felt like it's not much. If I knew the questions made me nervous. If I knew the answer, I wouldn't be here, something like that. But going through the training, I actually got trained with Mike, and then also I found a coach in Bratislava, and I really worked hours on analyzing where the problem is. And at the end, it took me 2 years to figure it out, that it was really the way I chose words, where I put the stress, and how I communicated. And that's basically what motivated us and inspired us to go on with the coaching with our teachers and further on. I think that is what it gave me, and what it taught me was that to be a good listener, it's not just a buzzword that is so often heard or said, but it actually the essence of the communication. And I found coaching as a great training of listening skills, and then also asking questions of clarification and making sure that the other part of the communication actually is on the same page. It's a lot more easier using coaching techniques than without them just following, going through the conversation as we would normally do. So so from my perspective, it was a eye opener, and it has changed significantly the way we manage to implement new things in a team, to agree on the new ways of doing stuff and moving the whole school and the team forward. So. Well, I hope that this seminar today will help us or help you to get what we have to say.
Thank you, Claudia. That's great. So was it sort of developing a sort of empathy and understanding of others as part of your coaching, and the way that language builds in a second language, in English, that certain words work that made the difference to you?
Yes, actually the realization that it is so, because I've never, I never really realized that I'm not as nice as I'm in my mother tongue, to put it simple. I did my best, and still the language that came through my mouth wasn't the one I meant. And I wouldn't have realized that if there wasn't for coaching and going deeper in the discussions and actually analyzing why the communication breaks. And as one of my colleagues later on told me, that it's very difficult to correct someone's language once the person's fluent. Because then, if the language is not good, I mean, you're making mistakes and grammar mistakes, then it's clear that the conduct of the language is not good enough. And therefore, you are much more tolerant and, understanding when the person, for example, uses the wrong modal verb or the sentence sounds a bit harsh. You kind of know subconsciously that the person probably doesn't mean it that way. But once the language is fluent and the person comes across as someone who can conduct the language very well, then you're not anymore so tolerant. And I think it's my experience is subconscious. So it's not a decision. It's something that you suddenly get easier offended, and also a lot more touchy. And it wouldn't come. I mean, that teacher, a colleague of mine, he told me then that I don't know when to correct you, because I don't know what you want to say, and I don't know whether you said it or not, because I can't look into your head. And in this way, coaching helped me enormously, because it forced me to reflect on what I'm saying, and it also, by the nature of the coaching interview, it helped me to understand that I'm not really saying what I meant to say.
Cool. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Claudia. Any comments from anyone else on that?
Can I come in?
Yeah.
Jaffa. Claudia, I'm curious. You said I'm not as nice when I speak in English, and I wondered if you could unpack that. What came over for me, there were two distinctions, and I'm just posing this as two possibilities. They may not be your possibilities. English you might use English in a functional way. So the sort of emotional part is absent because it's a function and it's a language of work. Whereas Slovak is much more, much richer. It's got emotional as well as functionality when you speak it. Is that what you mean, or what do you mean?
No, actually, I found out that because I'm quite an open person in Slovak, using the same way of expressing myself in English and kind of not really going down the way of sugarcoating, as I like to say, made it a lot more harsh simply. It looked like I'm giving orders, but I didn't mean to give orders. But the way I expressed myself, it was not really lack of the feeling or emotion. It was just not being aware that the same sentences in English just come across as rude, for example, sometimes. Does it make sense?
Yes, of course it does. I'm still curious, so thank you.
I think there's something probably as well when we speak in a different language about the tone. So it's not always just the words. My French, I speak quickly in English. I speak very quickly in French, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But I think sometimes some of my clients, for example, would be almost monotone in English, whereas in their own language, look at me waving my hands around, I'm not Italian, I promise, but they're much more expressive in their own languages. And I think sometimes we get hung up on the words, but sometimes it's just the presence and the tone and the body language as well that go with that.
Yes.
I can see that if I can share that, because I work with clients from many different countries, and many of them we communicate in English during the coaching session, but the English is neither for me nor for the client the mother tongue.
Yeah.
So for me, I use a lot of visuals to help, but also I invite a lot my clients to think about it in your mother tongue and say it loud in your mother tongue. So I will not understand, but just for you.
Mm.
And what I observed, but that's really very obvious and clear now. I don't have the statistics, but I can say they just, it helps to move on in a different way, and it helps when they start thinking, when I see that the client is really somewhere getting somewhere to a point that it makes sense to go deeper. I invite to think and speak in the mother tongue. They realize things they wouldn't, they just come to different insights. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes, that's an interesting point, because of the associations you have with those words that may not translate, and the feelings,
and the feelings, and I can see it just from the body language. So
yes,
I see this as a fascinating thing, and also opportunities.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Moving
Mike,
on. So,
Mike,
yes.
may I say just one more thing?
Yeah.
That besides being like for me in a practical life, not being a coach but being a manager, it's kind of a cow criterion, because if I don't express myself in a way as I mean, that means that I'm not actually doing what I want, and I'm not getting my team where I need it to be, and it's a huge issue in terms of the practicality of communication.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. So it gives you an extra dimension. We'll move forward a little bit, but please feel free to ask the question at a relevant point. So, yeah, so the first thing we were going to look at is, can you be more authentic in a second language? And this is the $64,000 question, or whatever you want to call it. It partly depends on your level. So if you are struggling at a lower level, you can get very frustrated. So I had a Russian student who was almost tearful because he was very funny in Russian, but he couldn't bring his humor into his English language work because of hadn't got to that stage of development. So he was in some ways less authentic, and it affected him. But on the other hand, I think some people already said that maybe you listen more carefully in a second language. Maybe you generate more awareness because you become aware of the impact of some of the words, maybe from your native language to your second language. And also you get different models and concepts, and that gives more flexible behavior. I know of someone who was autistic, and they grew up with having to speak Spanish, and that gave much more flexibility to that person because they could see that concepts were slightly different in different languages. So can you be more authentic? We are debating this amongst ourselves, and I would say the truth is never pure, never simple. It's partly it can release some of the constraints you have in your first language, but it can also restrict you because, as Do says, we have more emotions sometimes in our first language. But learning, I think from learning a coaching point of view, I think you can be clearer sometimes and more less interactive, and in that way it can present an advantage. So I don't know if there's any comments on that or any views on that. Does your question come in now, Manon?
Well, I wanted to say that in my case, I feel it's something different that makes me talk differently in language. I use 3 languages usually, my native, and then Portuguese and English. But
Right.
what I notice is also that the culture that has its influence. So when somebody told me once, a Portuguese person who heard me talking Dutch, that I how you say that in English? You use it was more lively. It was livelier.
Right.
I talked in Portuguese in a more modern way. But when you compare the languages, it is like that also in general, when you compare these languages. So it's also influenced by that. And also Portuguese culture is much more formal than Dutch language or the American English.
Yes.
And that's something I found funny too, because since a year I'm working in the American market, which is of course different than the UK market. And I noticed that although it wasn't a language I was using that much, because it was mostly in Portuguese until the pandemic, but I noticed when I started to talk in English American, although I had to concentrate more because it was I was not that used to it, but it also was more relaxed in a kind of way, because it was similar to my Dutch way of being, more informal. So that was interesting to notice the differences.
We've all been, the three of us in this room, been influenced by a great teacher called Mario Rinvolucri, and he said that people actually have the choice sometimes when they learn a second language to almost change their being, or to be more of themselves. And I think there's a degree of truth in that, but also I think you're right, Manon, about the cultural aspect. You can't speak French without a certain amount of flair and panache, perhaps, or maybe that's too. But so, and then German, you've got to, the language means that you have to describe things more precisely and so on because of the construction of things. So there are a basic thing, cultural aspects that maybe are released through speaking a second language. Okay, so we'll go on to Andrea. You were going to share something on.
Yes. I would like to tell you about our approach to the course. And we've decided to combine language aspect and learning a new skill, because we believe that you can learn a language through learning a new skill. So this is what is happening in our course. Participants are learning coaching, but also they have extra language input sessions where we address their individual language needs. So it's either help with vocabulary, help them to rephrase their thoughts and ideas to sound maybe less blunt, because we Slovak learners, we tend to be quite blunt. And also some grammar issues, maybe like asking questions or whatever is basically needed, and also pronunciation. And the minimal level for our participants is B2. Another aspect, apart from these extra language sessions, is that when they do self-reflection as a part of the course, then we give them feedback also on the language. So we help them with the mistakes and errors. So we also look at the language side of things.
This is a tool. This is a little exercise that we're going to go. Andrea invented this. So it's based on Dixit cards. It's a simple tool, but we use this either in our language coaching or in our coaching. So you take a card that represents you now and in the future, and discuss with your partners your choices. So we're going to put you into, I think, freeze to do this. Are we going to say you're going to put the slides in the Zoom room as well, aren't you? Mm-hmm. So we're going to do an example here, Andrea. So you're coaching as it stands at the moment. Which picture would you choose?
Okay, so my coaching right now is I'm learning. It's picture number 2. So this is a gentleman going up the stairs. So yeah, okay. That one. So I believe that.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I believe that I have a lot to learn. So I feel that I'm going up with my learning coaching.
Cool. And how easy is it to get to the next one? You can play around with this as coaches. You can look at the picture. How easy is it to get to the next coaches? How far have you come, from how long's your journey been and so on. So you can play around with the pictures. And then the second picture that represents you, perhaps how you'd like to be in the future.
That's picture number 6. So it's the last one in the first row. And I would like to have the keys to open the mind and personality of other people. So, you know, to be able to choose the right method and the right technique, and basically to know what I'm doing.
Cool. Okay. So, do you want to play around with that? Would that be interesting for you?
Yes. So I'm going to open the rooms. We'll give you 5 minutes. And once you are in the rooms, I'll share the presentation or share the picture into the Zoom rooms.
How did that go? Oh, Zoe, I saw you, Zoe and Dionysa. How do you say your name, Dionysa?
Dionysia.
Dionysia.
It's close to Dionysos, you know.
Yeah. Dionysa told us a very interesting fact. Do you mind repeating it in?
I would like to start first with saying that I have a growing sense of coaching being a language by itself. Because I had the experience of working with Chinese coaches and managers who are trained to become mentors, internal mentors in their company. And my dear colleague and mentor Sylviane Cagnot is here to listen to what I'm saying. And despite the huge differences from Europe to China, between Europe and China, there was this common language, and there was a very solid field of common understanding. And I was really happy to experience this. Beyond that, what I said previously in the break room was that I am Greek. My native language is Greek. However, for historical and geographical reasons, I had to date the opportunity to coach only in French and in English. I don't know if it makes it more difficult, if this reality of mine helps me be more agile and more adaptive.
You also said the language you least like coaching in is
my own language. Yes, because all my training, all the foundational training, all my exchanges with fellow coaches and mentors, and me as a coachee or as a mentee, I have had all these experiences only in French and English, never in Greek.
Yeah, so interesting.
For this reason only. Yeah.
I can second that experience. Different language, totally the same. Totally the same experience, Dionysia. My native language is Latvian, and I left the country more than 30 years ago. I still use it in settings and for coaching, but it's an effort.
Right. Cool. Okay. How did those groups go? Any other insights that came out of your work? Yes, Sylvia.
Yes, I was with Veronica in our room, and she's from Czechia and I'm from Belgium, and we both work in different languages. And by the way, I'm a colleague to Dionysia, and I see that Tatiana is there too. So in fact, I was just saying that I coach and I mentor in China, in Russia, around the world. And you know, the best language that we are developing now is silence.
Yes, good point.
Silence. You don't need to talk the language. You need to talk the energy of the client, the emotion of the client, you know. And the question, when you are curious, you just ask a very simple question. What makes you do this? I think everybody can say that. What for? What's the meaning behind? What is important for you? It's the powerful question is the adequate, simple question. It doesn't have to be complicated. Because otherwise it's your ego talking. Yeah. And for me, let me tell you, and Tatiana was there, Tuesday, I brought a US government public servant into Russia. And one was speaking about the forest near the Potomac, and the coachee was speaking about the taiga near Novosibirsk. They were speaking the same language. We never know what is translated. So we have to let it go, hoping it is the same. But what is difficult is the connotation, the true meaning of some words. For instance, I was with Veronica, I was having fun because if you speak about initiative or empowerment. To an American, it has another definition than for a Japanese or for an Asian who is living in community, you see? Same for an African. So it's interesting to see the connotation of words. I don't know about you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to teach some Somalis and coach Somalis, and they don't have the concept really of communicating individually one-to-one. It's very much, you know, in a group and balancing that group. So it's a different way of being, and the concepts or the coaching concepts have to take that into account, I think. I totally agree about silence as well, and body language, and you know, just being very, very simple in your approach to gain clarity. Yeah, and fantastic. Thank you for your input there, Sylvia. Okay, so that was a visual exercise. We're linking sort of learning coaching and language learning because that's partly why we're coming from where we're coming from with the Bridge coaching practitioner. But one of the another reasons why learning coaching may help learning language is that the same skills accelerate both elements. So in learning coaching, you need to take risks. You need to sort of experiment, trial and error, and so on. And you need to take account of really understand the other person that you're working with, or people. And you're working on an equal basis as a partner, as a collaborator. And generally you're looking to be as calm or as if you like, emotionally positive, if you like, and to enable that person to be listened to and pay attention to what they need to pay attention. And exactly the research shows that exactly the same traits, if you like, or elements are very important to language learning. So if you take risks in a language class and you speak to different people, if you learn about the real human being rather than just the sort of task or the matter in hand, you develop your empathy. And what is often a barrier in language learning is self-esteem and feeling that you're not as good as someone else, or so on. By working as a partner on an equal footing with where all the communication processes are valued equally. So listening is valued as much as speaking, being in rapport is as important, non-verbally is as important as the verbal stuff. Then you take away some of those barriers. So I think that's why it's quite an interesting area. Okay, just one more thing. I appreciate that here we got a very high level of coaches. So I don't know if all of this is relevant to you, but I'll stop at some point because there'll be another exercise to do where you can develop stuff. But very simple. I worked in an intensive language coaching hub, if you like, where people were who've found it very difficult to learn a language, but they had to for their work purposes. And often the barrier was the relationship with themselves. And these three people were part of that hub. They were the ones that were running it. And they wrote a book. And some of the questions they used are quite interesting from a language point of view. So how much out of 10 do you like your language, the English language, English culture, which is the point we raised before? And then the key question was, what about your relationship with your English? How much do you like your own version of the language you're speaking? And very often this was much lower than the other two questions. So people would say, well, I don't like my accent, or I don't like the way I stumble for words, or when I'm in a meeting, I'm afraid to speak, and so on. And so the task was to move from the knowledge, learning the grammar and the tenses and whatever, to the self-transformation, i.e. the relationship that you have with yourself and your own relationship to the language that you're speaking, and to transform that. Because once that's transformed, there's less of a barrier to actually taking on the language. Plus, you're getting immediate responses, what we call flow responses, and you're able to converse and move forward again. And the second key question was a reframing question, which was, how young is your English? Right? So people just assumed that they could turn up and their English would improve, working, you know, one hour a week or whatever, and that skill set would progress. But in fact, and they were very harsh self-critics. And what they didn't take into account is that their English was relatively young. They might have learned it at school, but they'd forgotten it, or they weren't using it very much, they were avoiding it, and so on. So that was another question which changed the perspective that people looked at. And then the third thing was, well, I'm not confident in English. And then you ask the question, when will you be confident? And they'll say, well, when I've learned X, Y, and Z. But again, that becomes a barrier because you've got to learn X, Y, and Z, and you're not confident to do it. So it's a sort of circle that goes round and round. So again, transforming that point is, when will you be confident in your own sort of learning process, to trust yourself to learn? And then that, once someone is happy with the way they learn, then they have the confidence to continue learning. So it's, I suppose, a distinction between being and actually, so being confident as opposed to gaining confidence or having confidence. And the other thing that we've sort of looked at in language coaching is, and this applies to all coaching, it could apply to tennis, it could apply to anything, that your language performance or your learning performance is your potentials minus the obstacles to flow. And the typical obstacles in language learning are the rapport with the coach, the relationship to your own version, your ego, what you called ego, maybe your self-esteem, the time that you put into it, whether you really want to do it. So some people feel they have to because they have to be a coach or for work, and then the emotions that it might generate. So I thought we'd do another mini exercise. And I think we'll go back into, I think it'd be good to go into groups just to get practice. So what helps you reach your potential? What areas of your life do you want to reveal more of your potential? What action steps can you take? So again, a mini coaching bit. And you could apply it to language, it could be to your coaching, it could be to your work. So take your potential. What obstacles are there to your potential? And how can you start to reveal more of the potential that's already there? Everyone willing to go for that? How was that? How did it go? Some smiling face. Yeah.
It's so beautiful always to meet the people. English is just our lingua franca is English, but it's a foreign language for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing.
Cool. Good. Any insights? Any offerings to? Yeah, go on, Sylviane.
I have two. The first is, when we just relax with the language and let go and the inner judge being away, the flow is there.
Brilliant.
And we don't care about our mistakes, just the flow is there. Right. And
Can I just applaud that point? I think that's so fundamental. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Otherwise, you split your thought in two parts. The ones which is speaking and the ones who is judging. So you leave a very big deal of your thought. The second thought, and sorry for the Anglo-Saxons, but we make the effort to come into their language.
Yeah.
And most of us, I don't know about who is speaking English, it's no judgment, but I think it's more difficult for me to understand an English from Liverpool, okay, who speaks with a very
strong accent,
strong, and references, cultural references of their own TV series, their own newspaper, etc. And we are supposed to, I just got, it was a GP, general practitioner, the person was just speaking, good, but for me, GP could be, because a medical doctor, for me, it's MD. Yeah. That's in American. And here it was GP, it's, that type of thing is very difficult. So it's about also paying attention to reduce the speed for the Anglo-Saxons. And for me, I don't know about you, but it's easier for me to understand a Californian than a guy from Liverpool, because they speak more slowly. Okay, that's it.
Absolutely. I mean, even as a native speaker, I went to Scotland when I was 18, and it took me 6 weeks to actually get the sound, the rhythm of the way they speak.
You were in Edinburgh. You were at Edinburgh.
Yeah, and I couldn't understand the word. And then suddenly one day it just all switched on, and I understood everyone. But so those accents can be very tricky. Yeah, I totally agree about the flow though, and the self-judgment, because that takes away your presence as a coach, and and also, that Batari box where that also transmits to your client. And so you're jagging the energy in the room. And so if you let go, it is about letting go. And that sounds simple, but if you can get into that flow state and trust your own self that you'll come up with the right words. And even if the words aren't perfect, silence in itself is as you've already said, is a great tool, and more silences are absolutely useful sometimes. So trusting the flow, I think, is a really important part of language and coaching and tennis, actually. Anyone else want to comment on that? Okay, what I'm going to do, because do you like doing exercises, or do you want, does everyone want to so we got one more quite interesting exercise that you might enjoy. I'll go through the slides so you've got an overview of what this seminar was about. We'll do one more exercise, and then if anyone wants to stay and ask questions or chat or whatever, we will have time at the end as well. So very quickly, what I'll do is, so we talked about the inner game of coaching, and there's an external game of language learning, which is activity and flow, practice hours, enjoyment. So flow comes from joy, creativity, doing things that you like, meaningful dialogue. Social interaction is another external game factor. And non-attachment to ego, in a way, letting go doesn't matter in some ways. It's self-trust and spontaneous flow. So that's sort of reinforcing what we've just discussed. We talked about having 5 linguistic coaching tools. I just put these out. They're quite basic, and I think most people would have used these in some way or another. So representing the issue in the senses is a good way to sort of deepen understanding. The metaphor, using the Dixit card, is a great way to represent a situation. Altering perspective through language, reframing, time, is it now, is it yet, and so on. Switching channels, and switching channels, I think, is maybe it's an underrated skill, actually. And because our exercise is going to be on switching channels. But to give you an example, my friend's daughter was stuck on her PhD, and she came to me almost in a tearful state and said, look, I can't write a word. I just keep going to the library. I keep watching books and, you know, taking books out, taking books in, doing nothing. And I said, well, draw your PhD. And she immediately went and spent 10 or 15 minutes just drawing, came up with an intricate drawing. And I said, what's in the picture that's not been written down? And we explored that, and it was a game. I think it was a game changer. I just heard that, by the way, Andrea, to add to that story, she got a first in her PhD the other day, so that was great fun. But so switching channel can make a difference. So we're going to try this one. You need a pen and paper. A describes the problem or challenge they have with another problem. They offer 3 sentences. B draws a picture that represents what they receive. And C listens for gaps. What's not being said, what's the emotion, and so on. Okay, if you've got that. So just A describes the problem. They offer 3 sentences. B draws a picture. And C listens for any gaps. So it's a mini coaching exercise, if you like, but can be quite interesting. How did you get on, Dionysus? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
I shared a problem, and I was. For me, it was great.
Oh, cool.
Anna made the sketch. She sketched an image. And Zafar was the observer.
Oh, cool.
And they were both great.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. I went into an interesting room. It was very interesting how it evolved.
Were you here dropping?
I went into room 3 and I just saw, we joined in with Gonzalo and who else was there? Titania and Jasmine. So that was interesting. Yeah, so it's not the perfect exercise, but it's a one that can help. I think those that have got language issues, it's a good way, but it's also a good coaching tool to switch, maybe sometimes switch, you know, you can switch to feelings, you switch to visual, and that can unblock as well. So it's got several different things, and it will lead to metaphors as well. So you sort of progress from there. And also maybe a refinement we discovered in the workshop with Jasmine. The person might end up drawing their own picture as well, and that's quite a nice finishing point. So they've got other people's perspective, and they enrich with that, and then they draw their own. I just wanted to sort of thank you first of all for coming and investing the time and giving so much to it, because you certainly enriched it from our point of view. We are experimenting with language and coaching, and you know, in our school. So if there's any people that you might want to learn coaching, that's fine. But I thought just for the last sort of time, is there any sort of more general questions or reflections or anything you want to ask us, each other, anything, or observations or improvements or refinements or things we've missed?
Sorry, Mike, is Bridge the name of your...
Bridge Coaching Practitioner, we're calling it. The Bridge. So it's based from the Bridge School, Bratislava, and our thing is called the Bridge Coaching Practitioner.
And are you going to post on the website the full set of slides, please?
We if we're allowed to, yes, it certainly will. Yeah. So you'll get those.
It was very original.
Thank you.
It was extremely original and very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Any questions or things? Any sort of feedback to us? Because we're just, in a way, we're beginning this journey. I think we've tapped on, you know, some sort of crossovers between language learning and coaching, which I think is quite an interesting area. But I don't know if anyone's got any sort of advice or Yeah, Dionysi.
Yes, I have a question for you. I remember having in another conference with another federation, the fact that when you change language, you change the emotion. Do you have surveys on that or analysis on that? Because quite often when you are very emotional, you just switch language, and that's an NLP point too. And it changes the emotion. But I would like to see if you have scientific evidence on that.
We don't have surveys, but there's no reason why we couldn't run a survey, so Andrea. Because we were having this conversation, this very same conversation this morning, wasn't it? That there's certain emotions get left. Your first language probably attaches to the emotions. And then when you go into your second language, they get more neutralized. But I don't know if that's strictly true. I mean, it could work the other way as well. And it would be an interesting area to explore. But we don't actually have any surveys at the moment, but it'd be a good idea to do that.
I did a survey on coaches 2 years ago, which found that it wasn't specific, that it was on switching languages during coaching sessions. And the switch always happened when a client started getting emotional and they needed to switch. Either they did it spontaneously or the coach encouraged them to switch into their native language to get the emotions out.
Cool.
And the emotions were inevitably in their native. There was one exception, and that was somebody who was married to somebody who they shared a third language with their spouse, and so they switched into the language of their spouse.
Right.
The one that they shared with their spouse. That was the only exception to in the research I did.
Was used to yelling in the language, yes.
But it was in the emotional realm, because obviously the language with the spouse was the emotional one, and their native language was German, which is not nothing against my German colleagues. It isn't necessarily the most expressive of the languages, and the one with his spouse was Italian. So, you can draw your own conclusions for why he chose Italian over German.
Titania, you had a question.
Thank you so much. It's really fresh air and very important for all of us who in not native language used to work and so on. And I have just asked for you, please, could you share with us one more time your last slide? Because not only me, maybe dislike to lost the connection with you.
Okay, yeah, of course. Share last slide. Okay, so that's Andrea's, and through Andrea, you can contact us all. So Andrea's is Zuhaminska at thebridge.sk.
Thank you so much.
Maybe when the world comes back to conferences, you can come to Bratislava and we'll have a conference there. Great city, Bratislava. So yeah.
I hope so. Not have been yet.
Yeah, it's something to look forward to. Yeah, to be honest.
May I add a final thing, Mike?
Yeah.
That comes to my mind. It's not the first time. I think that having to work in a second language, not our native ones, is a gift from a point of view. It helps us. It makes us stretch.
Yes.
And in a way that is an exercise of the brain, and it is a contribution to the effort as coaches. Yeah, I don't know. It is. There are positive aspects in the fact.
Absolutely.
And I have never asked the coach, a native speaker, English native speaker, how do you feel when we kind of kill your language, when we use your language with.
For me, I'm one of these very simple people. I applaud anyone who speaks a second language, and also for me, the communication is much more important. And obviously, that to have a dialogue with someone from another part of the world, and that they've taken the trouble to learn my language, it's a real privilege. So I personally don't. I don't find it as a barrier, and in fact, I like the different ways that people speak English because it enhances the language.
I think English language is the richest one because English language has embraced and has taken words and elements from so many other countries, from so many other languages.
Maybe, I don't know. It is an evolving language, but yeah, I wouldn't know. Yeah, but I mean, we're stuck with it as well because I noticed that I saw 3 people on a train, right? 3 Germans on a train going to Gatwick Airport, speaking in English. And I was told, I thought, why are they doing this? And I was told that in Germany now, a lot of management meetings are now in English. You know, so it's becoming the sort of lingua franca of business and so on. So we're kind of stuck with it as well. You know, but I do think rare languages are also, you know, Welsh speakers and African languages and all sorts of, you know, we need a diversity of language as well. So I'm slightly conflicted when it comes to, you know, English as a lingua franca. There's so many languages in the world.
Yes, but as a matter of fact, you cannot survive without English.
And that's the reality. And also as a coach, it gives you more possibilities because you've got, you know, wider audience, gives you more access. And the other thing, you know, going back to what you were saying, Dionysia, the brain, you know, all the studies are that you delay things like, you know, brain deterioration and so on through learning a second language. You live longer by bilinguals, you know, so there's all sorts of positives about speaking languages that outweigh any of the disbenefits, if you like. So,
if I may, that's the best anti-Alzheimer.
That's it, yeah.
Cure.
It is, yeah, apparently, yeah. Yeah, so speaking a second or third language. I had a professor once who said, well, once you get to your 6th language, the 7th language is easy. But I'm not really in that. You're there, are you, Sylvia? 6 languages?
Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. Is that a true statement?
My colleagues can tell. Dionysia.
No, I mean, is it easier once you get a certain, you know, once you...
Yes, because I make parallels.
Yeah.
I make fun having one word and in the 6 languages, you know, and it's fun. And yes, it's okay.
Cool. Yeah, so he was right.
But it's difficult because German and Dutch resemble. Spanish, Italian, it's an exotic cocktail, you know. So, and sometimes Italians, you speak Espanol, but the Spaniards, you speak Italian. Say, okay.
Cool. And the other thing I've discovered, we had a colleague who was dyslexic, and she was Bulgarian. So she escaped dyslexia in Bulgaria because they had an oral tradition. They didn't have much writing down. All exams were oral. And then eventually she learned Hindu. And because the symbols are sort of picture form, she found she wasn't dyslexic in that language. So that is another interesting aspect. It's the way that certain languages, you know, it's hard to see a B and a D. That's one of the reasons you get confusion with dyslexia and so on. So, yeah, so it's not, it's language specific, for instance, that particular aspect. So, yes, there we go. So I wish to thank you once again for coming. How many, have you got any more sessions left, or are you sessioned out? Yeah.
No, there are some more. But at 7 o'clock, it's in 1 hour from now, if I'm correct.
So I think you all deserve a break. But if you want to, please email us, stay in touch with us. And you know, we'd like to, and we certainly will share the slides and so on. So thank you very much for coming to our presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew and Claudia.
Thank you.
Thank you.